I think. Yeah. Oh. Nice. Oh, what's going on? We seem to have lost Steve. He said he was having an audio problem. He put on the chat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just going back to him, but he'd gone by the time I. Right.
Let's see if he. We'll give him a moment to see if he can reconnect, and then we should start.
He's back now.
The joys of Zoom. Is he trying to come in?
Okay, I think he's good.
Okay, hi.
Ah, there he is. Okay.
Hello.
Okay, everyone. It's now 7:31, so I suggest we start. So thank you very much, and welcome to tonight's EOM. John, would you like to do the honours with the GDPR, please?
Okay, certainly will, Chair. GDPR notice. Please note that the council is, and members of the public and individual councillors could be, making audio or video recordings of this meeting. The council's recordings will be uploaded to a cloud-based website of record and will be available indefinitely to the general public. By participating at the meeting, including by merely logging into it, you consent to this. If you do not consent to these terms, you should please not log into the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any apologies for absence?
None received, thanks, Chair.
Lovely. Do we have any declarations of interest? Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, personal in item 6, not prejudicial.
Thank you. Simon?
I have a personal interest in a number of the agenda items.
Thank you. Rodney, you're on mute, Rodney.
Yeah, I've got a personal interest in item 6, but not prejudicial.
Thank you. If there's no other declarations of interest, I'll move to questions from the floor. If anyone has a question from the floor and they'd like to ask, if they could turn their camera on and raise their hand, please, so I can identify.
Got a question, Chair.
John Catchpole and then Philip Bell, please. John.
Following the decisions by HDC regarding complaints against the behaviour of Councillor Alexander, why is he still on the council? He's clearly totally unsuitable to hold such a position, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Catchpole. I'll answer that as chair, and why he's still on the council is because the council has no authority or remit or ability to remove anyone from being on the council. So it's not within our gift to change that.
So in that case, would you ask him to resign?
We could ask him to resign, but I don't. But well, we could ask him to resign. Yes.
But if you asked him to resign and he refused,
Is that a
what would
question? There's nothing we can do. We could ask any councillor to resign. If they refuse, we can't compel them.
right?
We have no authority to compel any councillor, whoever they are, for whatever reason, to leave the council.
But are you not going to ask him to resign?
That's not a question I'm prepared to answer, I'm afraid, because I don't think this is an appropriate forum to be having that discussion.
Okay.
Thank you. Philip Bowell?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Item 6, staffing matters. As I mentioned at the last meeting, as the statements made by 2 specific councillors, which we're all aware of, have been at meetings attended by the public, or certainly listened into and watched by the public. I don't think it's appropriate that these are in confidential session.
Thank you. Your comment duly noted.
I do apologise. Perhaps I should have phrased it differently. I think that the council should vote on that statement.
We will be voting at item 5 whether or not to go into confidential. So it is at this point we don't know yet whether we will be. That will be up for a vote. So we may or may not go into confidential.
Thank you, Chair. I accept that. Thank you.
Nick.
I wonder if the chair would agree with me that it's sad and disappointing that the topics on this meeting, the COM, have been preempted by the anonymous resident Charles Sutton, using Facebook to put out information, misinformation and accusations against a number of councillors who are present tonight. And I wonder if the chair, he's also put out information which is just factually wrong, and I wonder if the chair could confirm my understanding that no former SPC councillor from this council resigned, citing bullying by an independent councillor as their reason for leaving. That's question 1. Question 2, no current councillors were co-opted onto this council. They were all elected. And indeed, even if a councillor is co-opted, they are still elected only by the councillors rather than the public. That is misinformation. And finally, that a point that wasn't made at the UM last week, I don't think, it's really important that residents understand that item 6 is about safeguarding the staff of this council. And that's a very important matter and should be dealt with, as I hope it will be tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. With reference to your first question and the posting on social media, I think it would be very inappropriate for us as a council to discuss that. I'm sure we all have our own views about the appropriateness or otherwise of the use of social media, but I think that's something that is up to individual councillors to look at and consider themselves. We could be here all night talking about it. In terms of bullying being cited as a reason for leaving, no, I'm not aware that any councillor did actually cite bullying as being a reason for leaving the council. If anyone believes that to be the case, then I'm sure they can discuss that with the individual previous councillor or ask the clerk, but I am not aware of that as a reason. I'm afraid does that cover all your questions, Nick? I can't remember, sorry.
Well, the second one was about confirming that no councillors on this council were co-opted.
That's entirely true. No, sorry to interrupt you. Yes, no councillor was co-opted. If one wants to be absolutely precise and pedantic about this, and that's something I am quite fond of doing, 2 councillors, myself and Simon Alexander, were elected but unopposed. So strictly speaking, we were elected. It's just that nobody stood in opposition to us. So the election was a one-horse race. So I'm just saying that for the sake of clarity, but nobody was co-opted onto the council.
No, correct. And that is in common with most councillors, parish councillors in the country.
That I couldn't possibly comment. That may well be the case. But,
well, it is a fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Trevor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I'd like to make a statement regarding agenda item 4. Simon Alexander began his social media abuse of Steyning Parish councillors long before election to the council. But on the 21st of December 2019, Councillor Simon Alexander posted the following about me on the Steyning PC Watch Facebook site. He stated, "But then I'm sure we don't expect much more from a blithering fool. Problem is, this one is full of SH exclamation mark T." On the 4th of May 2020, After continuing social media breaches of the Code of Conduct by Simon Alexander, I wrote the following to all councillors in an internal email as follows. I would therefore request that both Councillor Northern and Councillor Alexander make a written commitment to the other 13 councillors and our 2 parish clerks not to post on social media any further misinformation or fake news related to council business. We can then start working as a council in the interests of our community. Tonight is Steyning's version of the Oscars, except we are here to witness awards for multiple violations of SBC codes of conduct, namely the HDC decision notices. Simon Alexander was nominated for 4 awards, but he only achieved 3, and that must be a disappointment. Normally, the winner of an Oscar takes the opportunity to thank all those who helped him or her win the award. And in this regard, we only need to look as far as those councillors who on the 20th of August 2020 promoted Simon Alexander into positions of responsibility within the SBC, despite his role as administrator / moderator of the repulsive Steyning PC Watch Facebook site. Simon Alexander is unfit for public office. Anyone with an ounce of integrity would resign and publicly apologise to the HDC Standards Committee, the SBC as a body, the current and former SBC councillors who were subject to his vile postings, and the innocent Steyning residents that he continuously attacked on social media. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trevor. It was a statement, so not a question, so there's very little I can say on it, but I think it was what I would say in my capacity as a councillor, and this is only coming from me, that I think, frankly, it was very disappointing to see an ex-councillor making such an unedifying personal attack on someone else. You're perfectly at liberty to criticise Simon, as we all are, and to criticise all of us, and I think that's absolutely fine. I don't know that the use of facetiousness is perhaps the appropriate tool to use, and I certainly don't think it's very pleasant to launch into that kind of attack when the person doesn't have the right to reply, but let's be that as it may. Phil, you have already asked a question, so I will give you the grace of asking one more if it's brief.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to say, if almost exactly as you said.
We've lost, Phil, we've lost your sound, so.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't matter. I mean,
sorry, Rodney. Phil was speaking, but I think the Zoom gods have silenced him. We couldn't hear you, Phil. So, are there any other questions? If there are no other questions, then I would ask those who are not councillors to turn off their cameras if they don't mind, and we will move on to item 4, which is the Code of Conduct notices. I'm not going to read what it says on the agenda because we've all seen it. So what I would like to do at this point is to propose a motion, and I would like to propose a motion that Steyning Parish Council accepts all the recommendations made by HDC Standards Committee in relation to the Code of Conduct complaints as per the three decision notices within the supporting papers, and further that Steyning Parish Council accepts Simon's acquiescence to the sanctions, including his written apology dated on the 10th of March 2021. And that is the proposal I would like to put forward to Council. If anyone would like to speak against it. Paul. From you, Paul.
I'll get used to it eventually. I'd like to raise, please, 3 brief points of order, if I may. So point of order 1. The ICO requires us to publish supporting papers unless they are confidential. This is so that the public can follow what we are discussing. Please could the clerk explain why the decision notices concerning Councillor Alexander's conduct are not on the website, and if the clerk continues to maintain that this is because they are confidential, please could he explain this given that they are on the HDC website and they say within them that they are for publication? Thank you. That's point one.
I can answer that now, because the reason they're not on the website currently is because I believe at 4.2 we are going to discuss and hopefully agree as a council that we will be publishing all notices on the website as of tomorrow morning. As in, they will go on tomorrow morning, not decisions from tomorrow morning.
Well, Chair, that doesn't answer the point, does it? Which is that we are required to upload supporting papers because they form part of the agenda, unless they're confidential. John said they were confidential. They aren't confidential unless.
I thank you, Paul. John, do you want to speak to that?
It's okay, through you, Chair. Yes, I included them as confidential papers because at that point, as you rightly said, we haven't agreed to publish them. Yes, HDC published them in the meantime, but up until that point, we hadn't agreed. Now, when we do, then obviously we can. If we were to put them as supporting papers, then effectively the council has already published them. So for that reason, I included them as confidential papers, Chair.
Thank you. And your second point of order, Paul?
I just have to say that makes no sense at all, does it?
It makes perfect sense to the rest of us. So what's your second point?
Order two, please, Chair. Councillor Goldsmith and I asked for this EOM to be called, as there appeared to be no appetite within SPC to address the findings and recommendations with any degree of urgency. The motion we put forward is on page 2 of this agenda at item 4.3.
Yep.
Please could the clerk explain why what appears to be a preemptive motion in similar but significantly different terms has been put at 4.2. This seems to be requiring us to rubber stamp HDC's decision rather than consider any possible departures from it. Well, the other thing is that it's actually somewhat different to HDC's recommendations as well. So
no, sorry, hang on a minute. We're on your point of order here. So what's your point of order is the question why your motion is at 4.3 and there's two preceding motions. That's the point of order, is it?
Yes, I've asked the clerk to explain why this preemptive motion has been put in.
John, would you like to speak to that? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I will. I think there was actually an urgency in terms of wanting to deal with the issue, and that's why myself and the chair were discussing it within a couple of days of the notices going out. In fact, we'd already agreed that we were going to call an EOM when, Paul, you asked for your motion. I didn't want to not put your motion on the agenda because actually it covered some elements that we weren't including, and frankly I wasn't necessarily prepared to include, but I didn't want to exclude your motions just because that wasn't what myself and the chair had agreed. So to hopefully include everyone, to be inclusive, I went with the motions that we had already talked about and yours as well.
Could you clarify which?
And your third point of order?
Can I just ask the clerk to clarify which elements of this motion he says he wasn't prepared to put?
Do you wish to answer that, John?
Okay. Yes, through you, Chair, if you like. So it's really the 3 points that are there. Whether SPC accepts the sanctions recommendations made by HDC and so will implement those sanctions, or whether further or alternative sanctions will be imposed. It was the second part of that particular point we certainly weren't considering. The second item, the nature of any publicity to be given by SPC. I wasn't sure the nature of that. Certainly, I figured if we were to agree that we were publishing the notices, then that would be ample publicity as such, in that we were publishing them. And also we were having meetings to discuss the situation and to agree or not, as the case may be. And the third point, whether any further action is considered appropriate. by SBC. Well, that rather mirrored the first point. Again, any further action, although I was unsure again as to what you were considering, but if it was further sanctions, then certainly, as I say, that I wouldn't have put on the agenda other than the fact that you asked for it to be there. Hope that answers that, Paul.
And your third point of order, Paul? I believe you had three.
Right, thank you, Chair. Point of order number 3. We have been provided with no briefing paper setting out our powers and duties. Please could the clerk confirm that we are not bound by the HDC recommendations, because that's what they are, recommendations. It is for us to decide whether A, to accept them as made, B, to reject them, or C, to accept them with modifications. And if, as I believe the clerk will confirm, we do indeed have discretion, please could the clerk let us know what alternative or additional sanctions are open to us.
John, are we not discussing?
Yes, Chair, shall I attempt to answer that? Well, I think the powers available to councillors are spelt out within standing orders and policies, really. I don't think that there are any additional powers that I needed to make you aware of and that, you know, ought to be included as supporting papers necessarily. In terms of additional sanctions, we have been advised several times, as have I advised, that we weren't in a position to bring additional sanctions. That's within our policies. Therefore, I'm not quite sure what the point of order is, to be honest, Chair.
Well, perhaps I could clarify. There have been findings against Councillor Alexander and
We know that, Paul.
Please, Chair. Horsham.
No, Paul, can we talk to the point here, which is your point of order about additional sanctions?
Please don't interrupt.
Paul, please don't interrupt me. I'm asking you to talk to the point.
I am trying to.
We're not very successful at the moment.
What I was saying. The point is that Horsham has recommended sanctions.
Yes.
My understanding is that we are entitled to accept those recommendations.
Yeah, no, we've been through that.
Chair, may I?
Yes.
These do not, to me, seem to be points of order now at all. I think we seem to be now getting into the discussions on 4.1, 4.2,
yeah,
4.3.
We need to know.
Entirely agree.
Councillor Campbell's motion appears on the agenda. The fact that there's motions ahead of that, Councillor Campbell, like any other councillor, is perfectly entitled to speak on those. And I think much of what has been dressed up as a point of order could and should really have been spoken to within those motions. I'd like to second your proposal, please, Chair.
It's not dressed up as a point of order. I'm trying to ascertain what.
I'm afraid, as far as I'm concerned, your point of order has been answered.
It hasn't.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it has, and so therefore I'm going to move on.
Can I refer you to this briefing paper from Horsham, which sets out sanctions?
No, Paul, you can't refer me to the briefing paper from Horsham because you were talking about a point of order. We have listened to your point of order. We have considered
what is within our discretion so far as sanctions.
We have considered your point of order, and we are now moving on.
Well, you haven't answered it, Chair.
As far as I'm concerned, we have answered it, Rodney.
I was going to say perhaps Councillor Lloyd can put us right here. He's a district councillor. It is Horsham.
Rodney, you're not talking to the agenda, so can we please?
No,
I'm sorry, Rodney, but you're not talking to the agenda. We've discussed the point of order, and I'm moving on.
No,
as I'm entitled to do.
Well, can we know what our sanctions available to us are?
No.
Other than the Horsham?
Well, actually, Paul, no, we can't at this point because this is not what we're discussing, and this is not pertinent to the current discussion. So, Tim Rudkin.
Well, it's in your motion, Chair.
Tim Rudkin.
Talking about a kangaroo court.
Rodney, if you're going to persist in interrupting, it's going to be a very unpleasant evening, isn't it? It would be much simpler if you waited until you were asked to talk.
Well,
at the moment, I'm asking Tim Rudkin to talk because he had his hand up.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Tim.
Tim.
Can you hear me? Now listen, it strikes me that this whole thing is very undemocratic, you know.
Tim, are you
why
talking to the
can't we-
motion?
No, I feel,
If
Chairman,
you're not going to talk to the motion, then really, there's nothing to be said.
you see, what you're doing is that you're shouting everybody down.
No, I'm not,
when you
Tim.
hear
I'm just
things, when you
Tim.
hear things that you personally don't agree with.
Tim.
I find this meeting quite interesting. I
I'm
find
pleased you find it interesting, Tim, but you need to talk to the motion. The point is that you need to talk to the motion. If you don't talk to the motion, then we'll have to ask you to stop talking.
No, wait a minute. This is what you do, because you start to mute people when they're not saying what you personally want to hear, and I think you should stop that. It's not the job of a chair to do that.
It is the job of the chair to manage the meeting, and if you're not going to talk to the motion, then that's not appropriate, is it? Otherwise,
No,
you could be sitting here talking about the cricket. Now, I believe
you are managing the meeting to your own personal ends, and not to the good of the rest of the councillors here. I'm sorry, but you're not.
Sarah Sullivan.
I would just say that I don't think it's well, I'm surprised. I was just going to say, why did a member of the public, why were they allowed to show their camera?
So if you're not going to talk to the motion, this is irrelevant. You're not talking to the motion. And currently, it feels very much to me like certain councillors are trying to obstruct the business of the meeting. Now, does anyone wish to speak for or against the motion?
Can we hear the motion again, please?
You most certainly can. The motion is that SPC accepts all the recommendations made by HDC Standards Committee in relation to the Code of Conduct complaints as per the 3 decision notices within supporting papers, and that SPC accepts Simon's acquiescence to the sanctions, including his written apology dated the 10th of March 2021. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Sarah?
I would just say I've never heard such a hollow apology, and there was no apology from Councillor Alexander to the resident that he warned would be burned. And he dictated which bits he would cherry pick out of the sanctions.
Stop, because you're not speaking to the motion. Thank you. Paul, are you going to speak presumably for or against the motion?
I would like to speak to the motion, please.
Thank you.
Now, in deciding whether or not to accept Horsham's recommendations, or indeed to impose alternative sanctions, we need to look at, firstly, the lack of contrition in the apology, in my opinion.
No, we don't. Again, you're not speaking to the motion.
Relevant to, this is just unbelievable. We're trying to debate what sanctions we should.
No, we're not trying to debate what sanctions we should or shouldn't.
That's exactly what we're supposed to be debating. We've had a recommendation from Horsham about whether or not to impose these particular sanctions.
No, the recommendation from Horsham was to impose the sanctions.
No.
It was not whether or not to impose them. The recommendation from Horsham was to impose the sanctions. The sanctions have been accepted by Councillor Alexander, and my motion is that we accept those sanctions and the apology.
I know, and you want us just to say yes, but I'm saying...
No, I don't necessarily. I want you to actually debate it, Paul.
I'm saying there is a debate to be had, and you keep interrupting so that nobody can begin with a train of thought. Now, what I was trying to say...
I'm not responsible for your train of thought or otherwise, Paul, so are you going to speak to the motion? There
are a number of departures from HDC's recommendations which I think are appropriate.
Well, that's not... Well, that's... So basically, so your proposal is that you don't think that we should accept the motions?
I'm trying to get the point across that, for example, one of the sanctions open to us...
We don't have any sanctions open to us. According to you, we don't have any sanctions open to us.
This is just unbelievably... I will actually make a code of conduct complaint to Horsham concerning your chairing of this meeting. This is unbelievable.
That's fine.
Please,
your threat is duly noted, Paul. Thank you very much.
Can I just finish a sentence without being interrupted?
If it's relevant to the meeting, yes.
It is absolutely relevant to it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I'm trying to say that Horsham has recommended sanctions.
We're aware of that. We don't need you to tell us again, Paul. I think we all know that.
I want to make a cogent sentence without you interrupting me.
Continue.
Horsham has recommended sanctions. We have a we have a right and a duty to consider whether those sanctions are appropriate. Now, in deciding that, we're entitled to look at the alternative ones. For example, there is a right of this council to censure Councillor Alexander. That is one of the lawful things we're allowed to do. We're also entitled to extend the suspension, not just to committees, but also to working parties, also to outside bodies. We're entitled to consider whether we think 3 months is an appropriate period. It may be too long, it may be too short. We're entitled to say that whereas personally, I thought 3 months was pretty much spot on until Councillor Alexander decided to be dishonest in his apology. And I would say that that merited a further sanction on top of making it 4 months rather than 3 months. And I would also say...
Sorry, excuse me. Sorry, Paul, but Steve has his hand up. Is that a point of order, Steve?
My final point. My final
point. It's a point of order, Paul, sorry.
It's a point of order. I'm afraid I have to ask you to stop briefly while the point of order is made.
It does sound to me like Councillor Campbell has an amendment to make, and I would ask that we have a motion. I've seconded it, and I would ask that Councillor Campbell just puts his point as an amendment.
Well, I'm trying to get the mood of the meeting as to whether an amendment would be wise or not. And the one final thing that I wanted to raise was that Councillor Alexander has made this purported apology to the council itself, but there's no hint of any apology to the member of the public who was threatened and who Horsham has found was bullied and treated disrespectfully. Now, I would think that it would be wise to invite Councillor Alexander to apologise to that member of the public. I would expect him to want to do it freely and openly. But if he doesn't want to do it, I think that that would be a reason for us to think that 3 months was insufficient and that maybe a further month should be.
So are you proposing an amendment to my motion, Paul?
Well, if you like, I am proposing...
It's not a question of what I like, it's a question to you.
My amendment is to substitute the motion at 4.2 and to discuss that. Sorry, 4.3, the motion that we put forward in the first place.
No.
Sorry, no.
No, because you're proposing. So what you're proposing is to negate my motion and replace it with your motion. Is that what you're proposing?
No, it doesn't negate it. It amends it to my wording.
No. Your wording is completely different. Well, okay, well, then we can vote on it. If that's your amendment, and that's absolutely so. Do I have a seconder for your amendment, please? Sorry, John, did you want to say something first before we move to a vote?
Sorry, if we're going to be voting on this, I'd like to be a little bit clearer as to precisely what motion we are voting on. An amendment, yes, but in what way, Paul, please?
In exactly the way I described, John, to amend Councillor Northam's wording so that it says this, what my wording at 4.3 says, and that we then discuss that.
Sorry,
I think you mean Councillor Norcross's motion.
Oh.
Do you not, Paul?
I beg your pardon.
Okay, sorry, Steve, I think you had a point of order before we move to the motion.
Well, I was just going to question the name there, but I can't see that. I can't see that 4.3 doesn't seem to be. I've read it several times. It doesn't seem to be framed as a motion. They seem to be questions. Whether SBC accepts.
Yes, and then we can.
I think if it's going to be used as an amendment, I think you need to craft an amendment.
Dear God, honestly,
yes,
if this council wants, instead of addressing the really serious misconduct by council.
Okay, Paul, if you're not going to talk to the motion, then I'm going to move to a vote.
The unedifying process.
You're not talking to the motion, Paul.
Been in my.
No, Paul, I'm sorry, but you're not talking to the motion.
I don't want to talk to it anymore. It's a farce.
Thank you.
Nothing more to say.
Thank you. Duly noted. Thank you very much. In which case, as we don't have an amendment to the motion, do I have a seconder? Actually, Steve, you seconded my motion, did you not?
Steve did, yeah.
In which case, please I'm going to move to the vote. So can I, sorry, Tim, did you want to speak? Tim Lloyd.
Yeah, Chair. Sorry, as a point of order, I think there was a motion, it was seconded.
Yes.
So I think that motion should go through unless it's withdrawn.
Yeah, no, what Paul's motion?
Paul's motion. Well, Paul made a motion, Rodney seconded it, and Sarah put a hand up. I can't see anybody else.
Okay.
So I'm assuming that the vote was sort of taken, but.
So Paul, would I be right in saying that your amendment is that we replace my motion with your motion at 4.3?
No, actually, I'm going to withdraw that one. And if I may, I'm going to propose an alternative one because I accept what Steve says. We're going to just go around in circles on that. So can I try a different tack? So that in this motion...
Are you proposing an amendment to the motion?
No, Chair, on a point of order, I'm not sure that is lawful for Councillor Campbell to bring in yet another amendment. We've got one that has already been seconded. We should be voting on that. If there is then a further amendment, then that's fine. But
I've withdrawn it.
Well, okay. Well, if you've withdrawn it, can you make that quite clear, please? And your seconder should also withdraw it.
No,
should also withdraw his seconder.
We looked at standing orders on this point only at the last meeting. There's nothing to do with the seconder. The proposer is entitled to withdraw it, and I have.
Are you proposing an amendment?
No.
Are you proposing an amendment to my motion?
I am.
And if you are, can you please say what the amendment is?
So your motion provides for Councillor Alexander to be excluded from all committees for 3 months. I would like to propose that be amended to include subcommittees, working parties, and external bodies.
Is that it?
Yeah.
So you propose that my amendment should say, your amendment would say that all recommendations made by HD Standards Committee in relation to the Code of Conduct, etc., and to include. So that we could be clear about what how the amendment would sit in the motion, and that those sanctions would then include, or I'm not writing the motion for you, so I just know John presumably needs to know exactly what the amendment would, how it would read.
The motion on the agenda says at the end of the second line, and to accept that the subject matter be excluded from all committees for 3 months. All I've suggested is that the words subcommittees, working parties, and external bodies be inserted after the word committees. And I'm not sure that it should be accept, it should be direct, I think.
That's the 4.1 is not a motion on the agenda. Tim.
Well, you've got the advantage of having the motion in front of you. If perhaps you would either read it out or insert my wording appropriately.
John.
Yeah, could I just maybe clarify? Yeah, the motion that Joanna put forward, the one that was seconded by Steve, was one that Joanna spoke to just a little bit earlier, and perhaps for clarity again, Joanna, if you could read that motion. It wasn't Paul, sorry, it wasn't the one.
Yeah, no, I can't.
It's on the agenda, because that isn't a motion on the agenda. So Joanna, if you could read yours, the one that was seconded by Steve again.
I will, and just before I read it, I will also remind people that it says in the sanctions that the subject member be excluded from all committees and subcommittees. So it's already in the sanction, the use of subcommittee. So we don't need to insert it again because it's already in the sanctions. My motion was that SPC accepts all the recommendations made by HDC Standards Committee in relation to the Code of Conduct complaints, as per the 3 decision notices within supporting papers, and that SPC accepts Simon's acquiescence to the sanctions, including the written apology dated 10th of March 2021.
This is really difficult not having it in front of us, because what is the word? So we're accepting his acquiescence. So we're not doing anything.
Yes, we are. That's my proposal. I'm not saying we are. I mean, that's what the motion says. So Simon, I believe you've got your hand up, and then Tim Lloyd, and then Tim Rudkin.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring to your attention the case that Councillor Campbell quoted of Harvey versus Ledbury Council.
Simon, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is this
it is highly relevant to
in front of us?
Judge Cockrell actually stressed in her summing up that the independent person must be involved and consulted under the Localism Act, both at the decision-making breach finding stage and also the sanction stage. So the suggestions and actions of Councillor Campbell are actually now unlawful.
Okay, thank you. Tim Lloyd and then Tim Rudkin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, the sanctions are quite clear from Horsham. I don't see any reason why we should be changing them. Simon's agreed to them. He's given an apology. I'll come on to that in a second. And frankly, I don't think it's right, and I'm not sure that it is in our remit for us to change those recommendations. But I think we would have to have some further advice on that. But frankly, he's been through a due process, or the complaints have been through due process, which we've accepted. Which Councillor Alexander has accepted, and I think we should do the same thing. I don't think we should be changing them. In terms of an apology, I do take on board the fact that there hasn't been an apology to the member of the public concern, but I wasn't sure whether that was part of the sanction, that particular apology was actually itemised, if that's the right word.
Thank you. Tim Rudkin?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I hope you can. Yes. One of the sanctions that I thought was levelled at Alexander was the fact that he wasn't allowed into the Steyning Centre for 3 months. So, although we're doing meetings by Zoom now, why is it that he seems to manage to appear at all the full council meetings by Zoom? Where if they were taking place in the
He's allowed to attend full council meetings. He's not allowed to attend committees or subcommittees, but he is allowed to attend full council meetings.
You've missed the point. He would have to attend the full council meetings in the Steyning Centre.
Yeah, I'm perfectly well aware of the point.
In the Steyning Centre, he can't attend a full council meeting.
He is allowed to attend full council meetings.
Well,
no, I'm sorry, I've answered the question.
No, you're making
Tim, the question, your point has been answered.
You're making it up to your own ends.
No, I am not, Tim. I politely suggest that you go and read
Councillor Lloyd saying about the apology to the member of public. Yeah, I would have thought that Councillor Alexander would have wanted to do that not be told to do it, just out of common actual decency. And I'm surprised that Councillor Lloyd is almost encouraging Councillor Alexander not to do it because it wasn't in the notes.
I don't think that's a fair thing to say.
Well, I do because
okay, I'm pleased you do. Sarah, and then I'm going to move to a vote. Sarah.
I'd like to explain why I don't feel I would like to explain why I felt the apology was so hollow.
That's not relevant to this particular motion.
Well, it is because if I can just speak, because you're not allowing anybody to actually speak. It just seems incredible to me that Councillor Alexander seemed. Well, he said in his apology that we have to remember these are unprecedented in the whole of the district for HDC to find eight breaches of code and of conduct. And Councillor Alexander's apology, he made mention of the fact that the breaches had been from some months ago, as though since then he hasn't done anything. When he sent that apology round, only literally days before.
So that's not relevant to this motion, is it?
We've got a member of public's video on again.
I can't see it.
Well, I can see it.
I can't see it.
I can't.
It's Alan. I think he's.
Oh, Alan, he's turned it off.
Must have seen it.
So, of course, if we were in the Steyning Centre, we wouldn't be telling people to cover their faces. So, but nevertheless.
No, it's.
Right. Does anyone? Tim. briefly.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, no, just to say that I think the personal attacks on individual councillors are inappropriate, but that's for another time. As far as Simon Alexander's letter is concerned, he has said he won't attend any committee or working party meeting for a period of 3 months. So I can't quite see why why this is in some sort of amended motion.
Okay, sorry, Tim. We need to stick to the motion. So
okay, all right.
Paul, do you still wish to insert something into the motion about working parties?
This is the point of my third point of order, where I was seeking clarification. We could have saved an awful lot of time, because if Councillor Alexander is right that the independent person has to be involved in the sanctions, and therefore when I posed the question at the beginning, do we have the right to impose anything different, or do we just have to follow what Horsham says? I mean, I'm not sure that that's correct, because
can I bring you back to the original point? Are you wishing to add working parties as an amendment?
You are talking over somebody when they're talking.
You're not talking to the point, Paul.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Am I to assume from that that you don't wish to amend the motion? Okay.
Councillor Norcross, if you don't allow people to actually speak, how do you know whether they're speaking to the point or not? Because
I think
you're not allowing anybody the right to speak.
Thank you, Sarah. So, Paul, do you wish to amend the motion as presented?
Yeah, I wish to do what is lawful. If it is appropriate...
So that's not an answer. Do you wish to amend the motion? It's a simple yes or no. If the answer is yes, then tell us how you want to amend it.
For goodness sake, if it is appropriate to amend the motion, on John's advice as to whether it's appropriate or not, then yes, I do, because I would...
No, just tell us whether you wish to... If you wish to amend the motion, Paul, please tell us how you wish to amend it, and we will vote on your amendment.
I am in the process of doing that, and you keep interrupting.
Because you keep not answering the question. So if you would just tell me what your amendment is,
I got as far as what I would like. My next
we know
words
what you'd like.
were going to be that the sanction be extended to external bodies and also to working practices, to working parties.
Right. John, are we able to vary the sanctions like that? Are we aware that we are able to vary them, or is there ambiguity around this?
There is, I would imagine, some ambiguity, because we have asked standards previously if we are in a position to impose sanctions, and they have said that we should not. Now, variance on recommended sanctions, that might be a little bit difficult, other than certainly if we were decreasing the level of sanctions, then it shouldn't be a problem, one would think. If we're increasing, then you might argue that that is imposing additional sanctions and that we shouldn't necessarily be allowed to do that under the advice that we have been given.
Thank you.
If that helps.
Well, it does help. So, Paul, do you wish to continue with your amendment?
Well, of course, the advice we were given previously related to us trying to do something outside of the Code of Conduct. This is very much within the Code of Conduct. So
nevertheless, do you wish to continue with your amendment?
Yes, I do, Chair, subject to it being lawful.
Well, we wouldn't want to do anything unlawful, obviously. Can I have a seconder for Paul's amendment, please? John, are you clear what the amendment is?
Yeah, your motion, but to include exclusion from working parties and representation on external bodies, but that it should be considered lawful. I would imagine you are hoping to include, Paul, just to cover it?
Yes, that's exactly what should go in, because after the event, if this motion is passed, after the event, the council can take advice from Horsham as to whether it's appropriate. And if they say, no, it isn't, well, obviously that bit will fall.
Do I have a seconder for Paul's amendment, please? Thank you. So all those in favour of Paul's amendment?
That's 5-4, Chair.
All those against?
That is a joke. It is a joke. Oh dear.
7 against.
Thank you. I'm afraid your amendment has fallen, Paul. So now I'm going to move to the vote on my original substantive motion, which I believe Steve Northam had already seconded.
Yes.
So can I ask all those in favour of my original motion, please?
Can you read it out again, please?
I certainly can. The SPC accepts all the recommendations made by HDC Standards Committee in relation to the Code of Conduct complaints as per the 3 decision notices within supporting papers, and that SPC accepts Simon's acquiescence to the sanctions, including his written apology dated 10th of March 2021. So, all those in favour of the motion, please.
Actually, can I just ask a question first, because I'm confused here now. No, because both Councillor Campbell and myself brought on this motion, right, 4.3, but it seems to have been hijacked by...
Rodney, we've already been over this.
Yeah, I know, but I'm confused, and can you please explain why you've put in 4.1 and 4.2?
No, because we've already been over it. Rodney, we've already been over this. So
can you? No, sorry.
No, we've been over this, Rodney. I'm sorry if you're confused, but we've been over this. We are moving to the vote. So all those in favour of the motion, please.
Has your has it been seconded?
Yes, it's already been seconded.
Okay, we're voting now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-4, Chair.
All those against?
No one against.
All those abstaining?
5.
Because I don't think we should be giving credence to the so-called apology.
So the motion is passed. So that brings us on to item 4.2 on the agenda.
Hello.
Yes, sorry.
I was quite upset with the way that you treated Trevor Cree this evening. There
was
he weren't nice words against him, and he was the bunt of Alexander's
Tim, can you please stop, because you're not talking to what's on the agenda, and if you don't stop, I will have to ask you to stop. Can you please stop? Thank you. We are now on item 4.2. And on item 4.2, I would like to propose another motion, and I would like to propose that SPC publishes on its website all Code of Conduct decision notices where sanctions are recommended. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Sarah, I assume you want to talk rather than second.
No,
I don't know if you want to.
I just wanted to ask a question, please, so that I know, so that I can know in my head. Actually, I can just see. No, just forget it, because I can just see how this is. I'm sorry, but I do feel it's a kangaroo court, but no, I'm not going to speak any further on it.
So you don't have a question on the motion?
Pardon?
You don't have a question on my proposed motion?
I was going to, but I'm not going to now, no.
Okay.
That's your little point.
No, that's fine. If you don't want to, do I have a seconder for the motion?
Tim,
are you seconding? Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Well, in that case, I will move to the vote. I'll ask all those in favour of the motion. Do you want to read it again? One more, dear, it again. Propose that Steyning Parish Council publishes on its website all Code of Conduct decision notices where sanctions are recommended.
Yeah. Just on a point of order, I do feel a little uncomfortable that somebody clearly has wants to speak against the motion, but is not doing so. I think in the interest of full and open debate, I wonder if you as chair would ask Councillor Sullivan again if she would give us the benefit.
Absolutely. Sarah, having heard the motion again, would you like to?
No, I didn't.
Made her position clear. This is just bullying in public. She's made her position clear.
Oh God!
Oh, okay. But no, if you don't want to, Sarah, if you don't want to speak, that's absolutely fine.
Made her position very clear.
Does anyone else wish to speak about it? Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion or against it? No. Okay. In that case, Tim has seconded it. Can I ask all those in favour of the motion?
Okay, unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. That brings us to...
Yeah, on a point of order, may I?
Yes.
I'd just like to, just to make a personal explanation. I was accused, I think, of bullying there, but my intention was really to help somebody feel able to speak. So I'm sorry if it came across as bullying. It certainly wasn't intended that way.
Thank you. Okay, this brings us to item 4.3, which we have indirectly discussed parts of already. Certainly, I mean, the first 2 points, I would say we've already discussed and had motions on.
Sorry, Chair. Can you please, when you go to the agenda item, would you mind reading it out, because I haven't got the agenda in front of me.
Okay. Item 4.3.
Thank you.
Is motions brought by councillors Campbell and Goldsmith re breaches of code of conduct for councillors. And I'll read the whole item and then we can talk to it. Following the findings by HDC Standards Investigation Subcommittee, as particularised in its decision notices, and there are 3 numbers, which are too long to read, the SBC to decide: 1, whether SBC accepts the sanctions recommendations made by HDC and so will implement those sanctions, or whether further or alternative sanctions will be imposed. Point 2, the nature of any publicity to be given by SBC, and point 3, whether any further action is considered appropriate by SBC. I would argue that the first 2 points we've already dealt with under the previous motions. Tim?
Yes, I agree with the first point, but the second point, the nature of any publicity, we've only really just talked about the actually publishing the notices from Horsham themselves, not any other publicity.
Paul, would you like to speak to the any other publicity?
No, I wouldn't, Chair. I'd like to withdraw the motion.
Do you want to withdraw the whole motion, all of it? Okay, thank you. We didn't have a second, so it's withdrawn. Okay, so that brings us to item 5, which is,
excuse me. I would like to make a statement in public before we go into confidential, if we do go into confidential, because I think that item 6 should be heard in public, but I'd like to make a statement so that the public can are aware of it. So if
Rodney, would you like to make that statement under the debate on whether or not we go into confidential? Because we will, well, somebody has to.
I was going to say I'll do it now if you like.
Well, tell you what, before you make your statement, why don't we see if there is an appetite to go into, if anyone wants to propose we go into confidential session, and if they do, then we will debate it, and at that point you can make your statements. Is that okay with you?
Yeah. I'd like to say it in public, so that's...
No, we can discuss it under. So item 5, confidential session, and it is to resolve under the Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act 1960, in accordance with Standing Orders 3D, to exclude the press and public on the grounds that the confidential matters to be discussed under item 6 may involve disclosure of personal or privileged information which would be inappropriate to put in the public domain. Do I have a proposer for that motion? It would seem not. If nobody wishes to propose it, then the motion is withdrawn. That's correct? The correct procedure, isn't it, John? Okay, so we'll not go into confidential session. We will stay in open session. Do you still want to make your statement, Rodney, or do you want to make it?
No, in public. I'll do it now if that's all right.
That's absolutely fine.
Okay, it's about 4 minutes long, and I'm not used to public speaking, so please don't interrupt me.
Could you make it slightly shorter?
Again. Okay, well, as long as yeah, I can get a free run at it. Okay, thank you.
Crack on.
Right, are you all listening? Good. At Tuesday's Personnel Committee, Councillor Campbell explained very thoroughly and professionally the reasons why the propositions against Councillor Campbell and me by Steyning Parish Council could well be unlawful, which appears to be ultra vires. And councillors who support this action could well be treading on very unsteady grounds, as the motion, in my opinion, is both undemocratic and more than likely illegal. This motion is based on a flawed investigation with predetermined and improper procedures, making it ultra vires. And very importantly, the whole process is biased. If the motion is passed this evening, I will not be able to exercise my right under the standing orders to put an item on any future agendas, nor to call an EOM, nor to update my register of interests, and in a nutshell, I will not be able to function properly as a councillor and will be inhibited generally. What appears to have triggered this action is that I've emailed the clerk on a few occasions urging him to deal with potentially dangerous fencing at the South Ash Play area since September 2019, some 18 months ago. Also, the clerk tried to put the blame on me regarding a number of health and safety issues in the MPF, Memorial Playing Field, which I vehemently deny, and I was very cross when the chair of the communities put her pennyworth in just to cause trouble. Of course, in both cases, it's the clerk's responsibility to make sure the rules and regulations are correctly carried out. Can I please ask, which councillors have decided that my emails are allegedly vexatious? And which emails are allegedly disrespectful on the integrity of the staff? Can I also ask why I haven't had the opportunity to answer and defend these allegations? It's not right, not fair, and more than likely it's unlawful for Steyning Parish Council to be the accuser, the judge, and the jury, especially when there are set legal procedures laid out to deal with these sorts of troubles. I was under the impression and always understood that councillors have a right to question the clerk and the office staff on their actions or inactions, as long as the facts are accurate. After all, I think the clerk doesn't believe that the councillors are the employer representing the residents of Steyning. The clerk and other members of staff are employees. His role is to advise, although I'm not sure whether he's qualified to do this, and to carry out the decisions made by councillors. So what do these sanctions mean? If I ring the office, will the phone be put down on me? That's ridiculous. If I call in the office, will the door be locked on me? When I'll send an email to the clerk urging him to deal with an issue or a reminder to him similar to the health and safety issues on the fence, what happens? Will the clerk deal with it or ignore which seems to be the norm? This motion is proposed by Councillor Lloyd, a district councillor, and Councillor Alexander, who has just recently received 14 adverse findings against him from HDC. 2 findings of lack of honesty, 2 findings of lack of integrity, 2 findings of breach of trust, 3 findings of bringing the council and his office into disrepute, 1 finding of bullying, 1 finding of breach of confidentiality, 3 findings of failure to treat others with respect.
Rodney, I'm giving you a lot of leeway here. You're not actually talking to the motion here. Now you are attacking
I've just got one paragraph left.
So long as it's not about Simon, that's fine.
If this motion is approved this evening from this vindictive kangaroo court, this will make it very difficult for me to serve the residents of Steyning like I wish to do. And in my view, this could be unlawful. Thank you.
Thanks, Rodney. Before we move on, and I'll come to you in a second, Steve. I would just like to point out a couple of things. One of which is that the motion we will be discussing is not the motion proposed by Councillor Lloyd and seconded by Councillor Alexander, as it happens. So that's just a point of information. And the second thing I would like to say is that it would be much appreciated if councillors refrained from making personal attacks on the office and the staff, because it's unedifying for everyone and it's unnecessary. Steve.
You've covered my point of order, Chair. I was going to say the same, that this was, it didn't seem to be talking to a motion that we are going to be debating. You know, tonight's motion, I think, is not about sanctions. It's about our duty of care and protecting staff.
It absolutely is. Oh yes, that reminds me of the other thing I was going to say. Well, actually, we can talk about it under the motion. I would just like, I'll come to you in a second, Paul, because I know you had your hand up, but especially for Sarah's benefit, because I know she hasn't got the agenda in front of her, I'm just going to read out what it says on the agenda so that Sarah is aware, and anyone else who hasn't got it in front of them, of what we're talking about. And it's item 6, staffing matters, and it's to discuss and agree any recommendations from the Personnel Committee in respect to the alleged vexatious nature of continued disrespectful personal attacks by 2 councillors on the integrity and standing of the Steyning Parish Council's officers. So that's what we're discussing, which Rodney's statement was relevant to in Maine, and the supporting paper, I believe, has the motion, and I will read out the motion so that everyone is aware of it. This is a motion that was proposed by Chris Young and seconded by me in the Personnel Committee, and the motion is: in the interest of the Council's legal duty of care and the well-being of its staff, the Personnel Committee recommends to Council that all emails and correspondence from Councillors Campbell and Goldsmith to the Council staff be directed through the Chair of the Council for the present time. This will be reviewed at each Personnel Committee meeting. Paul.
Yes, Chair. I've got 4 brief points of order, please.
Are they the same points of order that you had on Monday, at the EOM?
No, they're not. Could you just let me speak? So point of order number 1 is, please could the clerk explain to councillors the effect of the leading case of Harvey v Ledbury Council, which decided that any process resulting in a sanction against a parish councillor must use the Code of Conduct procedure with its safeguards of the independent person and a proper investigation and decision-making process by the superior authority. In this case,
I can answer that. That's your first point of order, Paul.
Finish my question. Anything else is
point of order.
I have given extensive reasoning to the clerk and the Personnel Committee as to why this process is unlawful. Please can John explain why SPC is not bound by Ledbury?
Well, I can say that the Personnel Committee considered your extensive reasoning. Thank you very much. We considered it, and we considered that we would carry on with what we were doing.
Well, yes, I saw
John,
that.
do you wish to continue?
Asking John to explain why SPC.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. John.
Ledbury.
Yes, may I, Chair?
You absolutely may.
I think the suggestion is this would presuppose that it's imposing a sanction. The point being that, as far as I can see, and it appears that the Personnel Committee saw that this isn't a sanction. It's not as Rodney was.
John. Don't be silly, John.
Rodney, please stop. John.
Thank you. It's not as, I don't believe it's as Rodney was suggesting, that his ability or Paul's ability to act and be a councillor would be fettered in any way. It's just that communication goes through a third party. That's all.
Oh dear, oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear.
Thank you, Rodney. Paul?
That really leads on to my point of order number 2, which is, please could the clerk explain the legal basis of a sanction under which 2 councillors are to have their emails vetted and censored by another councillor. This is not.
I think we've just answered that because we don't consider it a sanction.
Let me finish a sentence. This is not even a lawful sanction against someone who has had a code finding against them. So on
I think this is a repetition of your first point, Paul. We don't consider it a sanction.
Well, it's clearly a sanction because you've decided that my behaviour is inappropriate and you're requiring me to do something, namely submit all my emails to you.
Thank you. You've made your point, Paul, but we don't consider it a sanction. What's your third point of order, please?
Sanction. No, well, I'd like John to address it. He's the legal officer. He's the one who provides us with advice.
Duly minuted. John?
Yeah, well, I would just refer to the answer I gave some moments ago. I don't believe it's a sanction. The content of the communication would come through to me, and I would act upon it in the usual way. I wouldn't want it any other way. Certainly wouldn't want it any other way.
Thank you. What's your third point of order?
No, that's wrong.
No, I'm sorry, Paul, that's your opinion, and we've answered your point of order, Paul. What is your third point of order? Chris,
Chris? John anyway.
Paul, we've answered.
I understand how it's going to work. So my point of order is, please explain how this is going to work.
That's not a point of order. It says quite clearly what's in the motion, Chris. Chris.
Well, I'd like Paul to know that we did take advice from Trevor Lego at Salk, and he did say that if the office staff were being distressed and overwhelmed by the way emails were written, overlong, complex, intimidating, that the only thing we could do administratively was to route all the emails through the chair. That came from Trevor Lego.
Thank you.
So they are going to be vetted and censored, and they won't all go to John. John said he wants them all to go to him. I don't know.
No, that's John. Paul, you're putting words into her mouth, and that's not what we said, and that's not what the motion says.
Well, sorry, I misunderstood then. Could John clarify what he said?
No, it's not what John said. The motion, nowhere in the motion does it say that they will be vetted. It simply says.
Well, I'm asking as a point
directed to the chair of the council.
So
John has already answered your point.
Well, then what happens? Can you please explain what happens as a point of order once they reach your desk? What happens next?
They will then be sent on to John.
What, with no comment? No.
What's
the point if they're all going to go on? I don't understand.
Well, I'm afraid that's your lack of understanding is not really my problem here.
Well, it is terribly important because I'm going to be asked to vote on this.
Yeah, you could absolutely.
Well, I'm telling you,
I will send them on.
I don't understand the proposal.
Okay, well, let me make it very simple for you.
Thank you. Please do.
You're clearly struggling with it.
Please don't use
sarcasm. There's all emails from you and Rodney. Would you like to let me finish, or do you want to carry on?
No, well, actually, you never let me finish, so I'm saying I don't appreciate sarcasm.
Well, I'm very sorry you don't appreciate sarcasm. I wasn't being sarcastic at all. Right. There was nothing sarcastic about me saying you're struggling with it, because you apparently are. So, and my point is, the point of this motion is that any email correspondence from yourself or Rodney, for the time being, will be channeled through the office of the chair. And I will then forward them on to John as and when.
What do you mean by as and when? What does that mean?
It means as and when, and that's
no, I'm sorry, I just don't understand what is proposed.
What is proposed is that
everything will go to John, but after a delay, is that it?
Potentially or potentially not.
Well, is it going to be fed back to me that there's something wrong with what I've said?
I've no idea because I haven't seen the emails that you're going to be sending to me.
No, I'm asking you for what this procedure is.
Steve, I believe you had your hand up.
It is a point of order, Chair. I think we have a motion. I think it has been seconded, and instead of following the rules of debate, we seem to be having a tit for tat. All the councillors are speaking multiple occasions over each other. Can we have a bit of decorum? And please, councillors can speak to for or against the motion.
If somebody
Councillors can speak for or against the motion, and then we can take a vote.
Thank you. Tim Rudkin, had your hand up.
Can you hear me? Yes.
don't understand
Tim's trying to talk. Tim.
If I wanted to get in touch with John over a matter, I would want to get in touch with John.
Tim.
No, well, you're saying that it's got to go through the personnel committee first before.
No, I'm not, Tim. I'm afraid you've not been paying attention.
I don't agree with that because
you're not saying that at all.
Well, you are.
No, we're not. No, I'm sorry, Tim. You're not saying that.
If you're sanctioning 2 councillors, you're sanctioning us all.
No, we're not, Tim, and that's not what the motion says. No, it doesn't. And I would refer you to the motion.
That is very undemocratic.
So, does anyone else have anything they want to say on the motion? Are you talking to the motion, Paul?
Yes, I want you, under a point of order, to tell me how this is going to work, because I've
already told you.
Don't understand.
Your emails will come to the Office of Chair, and the Office of Chair will then forward them on to John and Hazel.
So there's no censorship and there's no vetting. So what's the point?
Because I might not forward them on at the moment I get them.
Yeah, because
so what's going to happen? I mean, how long have I got to wait? What's the purpose of this delay? I don't understand what the purpose of it is.
Chris Young.
Chair, I'd just like to say that the whole purpose of this is to protect the office and the well-being of the staff. And they've asked for help, and we're simply trying to give it to them by getting the difficult emails routed through you for you to pass on when you feel it's appropriate. Thank you.
So they are going to be.
Sorry, can we just stop for a minute? Alan, can you turn your camera off, please?
So they are going to be censored, is that correct?
Tim Lloyd.
Yes, Chair. I shouldn't perhaps say this, but I'm slightly confused myself because I understood that part of this process was to prevent the clerk's office from receiving emails that were using inappropriate language and tone. So I assumed, I have to say, that is what we would be doing. I'm not saying censoring. I assumed that they would be sent back to the sender and asked to be rephrased because some of it is very objectionable in my opinion. So that's what I understood. So I can see that there is some clarity is actually needed on this. So I think perhaps we should discuss that.
Absolutely, there you are. So does anyone have it? So that's well, Rodney, you're next.
Yeah, I was going to say, in other words, if you don't like something, that you're not going to send it on to John. But see, these emails to the staff are purely and simply because the staff haven't been doing their job right.
Rodney, no, this is exactly my point. Please, can you stop saying things like that?
For instance, she allowed those avatars to be displayed. Totally wrong.
No, it's not totally wrong, Rodney, and that's not the point.
She also
Steve,
sorry, on a point of order under Standing Order 2A.
That's bullying.
I think Rodney is disrespecting the chair and not disrupting the business. So under 2A, perhaps as chair, you could ask him to moderate his behaviour.
Absolutely.
Or 2B has to be voted upon.
I will ask him again to moderate his behaviour and to stop attacking the staff at a public meeting. Please, it is unedifying and unnecessary. Sarah.
Yeah.
2 points, actually. The first one is, I cannot believe the sharp contrast with, we've all been subjected to the absolutely vile emails by Councillor Alexandra, and not one single word has ever been said or done about it. I would like to know whether councillors, including the clerk, have actually read the Harvey versus Ledbury. I'm just going to quote this bit from Heason, which was referred to in Ledbury. Quote, where critical comment is made of a civil servant such that the public interest in protecting him as well as the private interests are in play, The requirement to protect the civil servant must be weighed against the interest of open discussion of matters of public concern. And if the relevant comment is made by a politician in political expression, the enhanced protection given to the politician's right of freedom of expression. And then it goes on, and I won't read it all out. But the fact is, only a year ago, and I'm going to just quote John here, he said, "What I believe will not work is when it is down to councillors to take into their own hands the nature of what has happened, take a view on who is right and who is in the wrong, and then impose sanctions on those councillors without a third party's input. This could send our council into further turmoil, as on top of initial claims of breach conducts, there will also be claims of unfair treatment by those who receive judgment." And I wonder who then deals with these issues. I mean, basically,
Paul's email, that was very helpful, but it's not a
well,
sanction.
no, what I was
exactly what's going to happen here.
What I'm trying to say is, it's, you know, sorry, I've got there's another gentleman. It's very, it's
been trying to sort out her video.
Right, okay.
The way that Tim's wife appears.
It seems quite extraordinary that the clerk didn't even circulate for more than 3 days the decision notices against Councillor Alexander.
You're talking off the point, Sarah. Please stop it. You know perfectly well that you're not talking to the motion. Rodney.
Well, I wasn't allowed to finish.
What I was going to say is about Standing Order 2A. I was just trying to explain, but see, in my statement, I said, can I also ask why I haven't had the opportunity to answer and defend these allegations? Why haven't you or Councillor Young?
Well, I'll tell you why, because I asked several months ago to send fewer emails and no notice.
And did Councillor Young, when she spoke to Trevor Lego, mention this, that I hadn't had any opportunity to answer the allegations?
It's not an allegation.
Did you mention it?
It's not an allegation, Rodney. We have.
Well, it is.
We've all seen these emails. There are plenty of them.
Yeah, but
it's the tone, the frequency, and the length. Tim Rodkin.
Can you hear me? Yeah. And listen, Chairman Norcross, you've managed to shout down everybody that's had anything to say this evening. Can you not let the free flow of conversation carry on? You've shouted at everybody tonight and stopped them in their tracks and barracked them, and I don't agree with it.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Tim. Paul.
Well, Chair, I never did get to my point of order 4, and then I do want to say something about the merits of this. So my point of order 4 is that because this process is unlawful, in my opinion, and because I wish to have my conduct investigated and judged by a properly independent process, I have today self-referred myself to the monitoring officer at Horsham, exactly as Councillor Harvey did in the Ledbury case. On top of the
point of order.
You've done it again. I am absolutely in the middle of a sentence.
I'm waiting for your point of order, Paul.
Well, if you didn't keep interrupting, we would get there very much quicker.
We get there much faster if you started with it.
Every other councillor is allowed to actually speak and then to put their motion, because
Sarah, this is part of I'm waiting for Paul's point of order.
Well, it's coming.
So is Christmas, but
this is so rude, isn't it? It's an absolute
oh dear.
You're so rude, Councillor Norcross. I can't believe it.
No.
Thank you, Gary. Paul, would you like to give us your point of order?
Yes, well, I've given you the first half of it, and here's the second half of it. On top of the unlawfulness of the current ultra vires process, for all the reasons set out in my email, it would also be improper of SPC to continue with this process now that Horsham District Council, as the appropriate body, is seized of the procedure. The only thing which it would now be proper for SPC to do is to indulge in the mediation process, which I have been pressing for months. And if we had a mediation process, we might actually have sat down and discussed how this was going to work.
That's not a point of order. Your second part was a point of order, and thank you for that and for your opinion.
Do not want to hear that.
As far as we are concerned, we still get to press ahead with this. This is your opinion that it's unlawful, and that's fine. But we are going to continue with this.
Well, you're pressing on with something that so far makes no sense at all. At least Councillor Lloyd has articulated something that began to sound as though it might make some sense. But what you explained, Chair, was that things would come to you and you would sit on them until you felt otherwise. I mean,
I misspoke in that case, Paul. What will happen is that if this motion is passed, and it has not yet been voted on, so it may or may not be passed. If the motion were to be passed, then email correspondence from yourself and Rodney would come to the office of Chair, and that office would read the emails and either send them on to John or return them to the sender and ask them to modify their language. Now, does anyone else wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I want to speak to the motion now. As I said, I would like to.
Fair enough, you haven't spoken to the motion yet, so please speak to the motion. Paul.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
So there are three things I would like dealt with by way of the evidence, please. So please could either the clerk or those who proposed and seconded this motion define what is meant by attacks on his and the deputy clerk's standing, and identify by reference to the evidence. We've got a bundle of evidence provided to us. So would somebody please, one of those three people, identify by reference to the evidence which words are being relied on to say that anyone's standing has ever been attacked by me? Because I don't believe that's the case.
Not in the motion. There's no reference to that in the motion.
It is here on the agenda.
Not in the motion.
I'm speaking to the agenda.
No, but I thought you were talking to the motion.
Well, the motion, seriously, is that your argument, that it's on the agenda, but we can't speak to it because the wording is slightly different on the motion? Is that seriously what you're saying? That we don't have to, that the evidence is now irrelevant?
Is it a point of order?
It is. I mean, we have a motion, and we're not. The motion is not the words on the agenda. The councillors seem to be talking about why have I been sanctioned? Nobody has been sanctioned. Yeah. This is a measure to protect the staff. It's not sanctioned. Please, can we get on with debating the motion?
This is here on the agenda.
Paul, we're talking about the motion. Chris, I believe you. Did you want to point order?
You have refused to publish this by reference to the evidence. Will somebody?
Paul, we don't need to. There's no need for evidence in this, in the sense that you're talking about here.
You don't.
We've all seen the emails, and it's not in the motion. Chris, I believe you wanted to say something.
You can't say you've seen the emails and then not identify what is meant. That's not evidence.
That's what I'm saying.
I just wanted to say, with respect to the motion not being lawful, that Trevor Lego wouldn't have sanctioned it if he thought it wasn't lawful. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. We are talking to the motion. Sarah, you've already spoken. At least once on this motion. Gary.
Speak twice.
Oh, sorry, unless you have something else you want to say, Paul.
Yes, I was asking. There's a bundle of evidence that's been provided for.
We've already been over that. We're talking about the. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
I'm asking,
not what's on the agenda, but the motion.
Oh, not what's on the agenda. Oh, that's right. We don't need evidence. I remember now. Sorry, I've finished.
Good, you finished. Okay, Gary.
I was going to say, have you got this written down from Trevor Lego, or is it just one of those telephone conversations?
Chris.
Yeah, it was a telephone conversation with Trevor Lego.
Thank you.
That's what always happens, and you never know the truth.
Right. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Tim Rudkin, you've already spoken several times. And understanding orders, actually, people should only speak once to a motion. Other than
Would you mind terribly if I spoke again? Would that be all right with you?
Is it to the motion?
You know, I don't want to upset you or anything, but I can't understand why John Fulbrook is saying that he would have it no other way other than to receive the emails. What is the need for all of this? What is the need for it to go before the person?
Okay, thank you for that, Tim. Does anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Do I have a seconder for the motion? Tim Lloyd, I think you seconded it, didn't you?
Second it.
Okay, well, in that case, I'm going to move to the vote. So can I ask all those in favour of the motion? Do you want me to read the motion again so we're clear about what we're voting on? Does anyone want the motion read again?
Yes, please, yes. Yeah, read it, yeah.
Okay, the motion that we're about to vote on is, in the interest of the Council's legal duty of care and the well-being of its staff, the Personnel Committee recommends to Council that all emails and correspondence from Councillors Campbell and Goldsmith to the Council staff be directed through the Chair of the Council for the present time. This will be reviewed at each Personnel Committee meeting. So, all those in favour of the motion?
Can I make an amendment,
Voting without
please?
any evidence at all. Yes, just to be clear.
I'm not even going to.
Councillor Young should answer that. She's chairman of the personnel. Come on, Councillor Young.
No, thank you, Rodney. Chris, would you like to just briefly speak to that before
Rodney,
we move
the
to vote?
evidence is in the emails, many of which we've all seen. The evidence is there. That's the evidence.
No, you have to produce a dossier of evidence. So
no, we don't. Now I'm going to move to the vote on this motion. So all those in favour of the motion.
You know what?
I haven't seen the evidence.
Absolutely ridiculous.
You're asking us to vote on something we have no idea what the evidence is.
I will not participate in this farce.
No.
That's fine. Okay, so sorry, all those in favour of the motion?
The evidence-free motion.
Is this at the Kangaroo Court?
7-4.
All those against?
Councillor Alexander was able to actually have, he was able to know what the evidence was and to make a response, but that's not being allowed with councillors Campbell or Goldsmith.
Actually, first of all, let's just vote on all those against.
This is tit for tat because of the embarrassment that unprecedented in the district. We have Councillor Alexander, 8 breaches
Sarah,
of
can you please
code
be
of
quiet?
conduct.
Any abstentions? Nobody's abstained. Okay.
May I have it recorded that I didn't take part because I will not take part in something which is ultra virus.
What was the vote, John?
7 voted for. I had none against and no abstentions.
Okay, so the motion is carried.
Chair, may I?
Yes, you may, John.
There were several references to no evidence being communicated. There were 26 emails PDF'd and sent out to all councillors. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday of last week. I'm not exactly sure the date, but it was specified at that point.
May I jump in at the point of order?
Steve, yeah.
Sorry, John, but this isn't relevant because nobody has been sanctioned. The evidence at this stage is not relevant. This is a measure to protect staff.
Thank you. And that's it, basically. I mean, we have arrived at the end of business.
That was the most unedifying.
The date of next meeting is the 19th of April 2021, and this meeting is now closed.
You swept it under the carpet with Councillor Alexander, and yet
Sarah, can you just,
it's absolutely disgusting. It's probably the lowest point in Steyning Parish Council, and I shall be making a code of conduct.
Did you say close the meeting?
Yeah, please.
I should be making a code of conduct complaint against you, Councillor Norcross, for your